All right. Hello, everyone. This is Justice with Jax. I'm your host, Jacqueline Armendariz Unzueta. You can call me Jax. This is season 3, and we're already on episode 2. Hooray. It's Friday, May 9, 2025. And so that is actually 1 year, 9 months, 9 days, or 648 days since the case Armendariz and Chinook Center versus the city of Colorado Springs has been filed. And so for the wonderful listeners of this show who are following along the journey, we have a lovely guest today who I also have the joy of considering a colleague and friend. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about the case, but first I want my friend to introduce themselves, name, pronouns, your community affiliations. Take it away, friend.
Hey, Jax. Thanks so much for having me on the show today. It's incredible to be present in this time with you always. Yes, my name is Alisa Rizo. I use she, her, ella pronouns, and I currently work with the Community Economic Defense Project.
Perfect. And so you're in for a treat today, everyone who's listening, because we're going to talk about CEDP and all the very important things you should know about the work that they're doing. And then you have this amazing human being that you're going to hear from who we'll talk about more about how we met. I would love that. But when it comes to kind of the vehicle for updates that this show is regarding this U.S. civil rights case that I am the plaintiff in, meaning the American Civil Liberties Union of Colorado. They are representing me, and the defendants are the city of Colorado Springs and the FBI, so they're defending themselves against what I and the ACLU and many others believe and know under law were some violations of my constitutional rights. So that's why I'm going to start the show off with the countdown, is that it is a journey. And it's like more than 600 days. It doesn't feel like that, but it does. And so what this Friday is the Friday before oral arguments for Armendariz versus City of Colorado Springs in the U.S. District Court, 10th Circuit Court of Appeals. So, you know, who wakes up as a little kid and is like, I can't wait for the day that I get to experience this milestone in my life, but it is, right? And so I'm like feeling all the feels, and it's reflecting on how, you know, it's been more than a year, like what, it's almost going on 2 years. And so another way that we like to use this show is, you know, a vehicle for knowledge, community knowledge, and also knowledge of systems, because we'll get into that, how that's important. But when it comes to like the big picture of what we're looking at here, right, the federal court system has like 3 main levels. And so that's the district court or the trial court where we were. Now we're in circuit court, and there could be outcomes from that, which we cannot predict, obviously. And then the next level of the federal courts is actually the Supreme Court. So it is pretty strange to be in the system with thinking like, one of the next levels, we'll see what happens, is the Supreme Court. And no, I don't have a high opinion of that body at this time. And so we'll be up there in Denver. We have our 3-judge panel now, and the oral arguments are on Tuesday, actually. And so once those are complete for the day, I guess that panel of judges, I understand, will meet to vote on the outcome. And then I guess there will be a judge from that panel assigned who will write the opinion. And the time from oral argument to when that opinion comes out, you know, can vary greatly. So I've also got a little bit of that hurry up and wait expectation, frankly, that you get used to if you've ever had to deal with any sort of legal matter and really be the David versus the Goliath, because let's be honest, like that is certainly some of the elements, the dynamics of this case. And so before people get tired of hearing me talk, I want to give you some space to chat about that, because how we became friends is through our work in the community and striving for a mission that's really justice, liberation for all, to oversimplify it, but in a way there's a sweetness to that. And so Take it away, friend. When we met, I don't remember if you had already heard about the case or if it was me telling you about the case. But, nowadays I introduce myself with this fun fact, if you can call it that, about myself. So we've talked about these elements of what I'm describing, and you've been a really great, one of many great friends in this community to really support what is a strange experience in a strange, chaotic era.
Yeah, of course. So I have a question for you, although I know that you asked me a question, so I'll respond first and then I can answer. When we had met, it was, I believe, 2023, 2022.
Yes.
And at the time, I had gotten to know who you were as a person before learning about the case specifically. And I had gotten to learn about your heart for community, your drive, and your dedication to serving the community. And over time, I've gotten to see your own pursuit towards freedom. And that's like self-freedom, freedom within self, and then also communal freedom. And I think getting to learn a little bit more about your case and what it looks like, I've gotten to see your pursuit for freedom in a whole other light. I've learned so much about Jax throughout the past few years since we first met, and I'm very appreciative of it. And as I learn more about what it means to be a human in the larger systems that we are currently in, and what it means for our mental and emotional health and capacity, and learning from you, learning alongside of you has been so much knowledge, so much. And I enjoy our conversations as well because we're always discussing new things and I'm always learning new things about you, about our systems.
Me too. I consider our friendship, there's just that like electricity to it when you like the vibe, right? And I think it's really beautiful because I think by the work that we do, because it is heart-centered, community-centered, you definitely find that here and there. And so thank you, my friend, because it's been a journey. And part of the reason this show exists too is that this case is about the community. Like, sure, it has my name on it, but ultimately I'm not doing it entirely for me. Of course I want justice, but overall, the consequential nature of the case is like, this is definitely for Colorado Springs. This is definitely for like our democracy. And it's a very weird. So we said 2023, we're in 2025. And it's like, just consider how our social and political landscape has changed in those 2 short years, So that's why I've been really motivated to continue doing this show. And making it to make sure it's a vehicle for all of the voices that should definitely be commenting on what is an issue that impacts us all. And the goal was always it's like, what do other people think about this case? Because there's a ton of different perspectives and there's value to that, obviously. And so thank you, my friend, again. And one of the things, another perspective I think that this is why you're here today, and I was so excited for it, is talking about the work that your organization does, which I'm going to even say, like, full disclosure, I recently had a huge assist from CEDP. Yeah, because I did apply for, it's the EMAP mortgage assistance, right? My HOA dues, they went up 24% this past year. And so thankfully, CEDP was able to step in and really keep me from becoming unhoused. Like, it really is that simple and so scary that a lot of us are riding this thin line of housing instability, right? And so I know that CEDP, that's kind of where the inception was. Like, it's a young organization, 2020, and it had to do with the, crisis level pandemic instability with housing and all that. So I definitely want the overview for people who maybe haven't heard of y'all before.
Yeah. So thank you. And I'm so happy to hear that there was assistance with your mortgage. And I know it was a long process and there was a lot of patience, but Yay.
That's a win, absolutely.
Yes.
And I got that news today, actually. So yeah, it's perfect that you're here.
Oh, incredible. Yeah, as Jax mentioned, we were born, or CEDP was born in 2020 amongst some of the economic immobility that we were seeing and how it was impacting housing stability for folks. And since then, we have grown to a statewide organization. We have our main office in the Denver metro area, and then our Colorado Springs office now, which has grown immensely, and then also an office in Durango and services in Fort Morgan and Sterling, Colorado. But
Wow.
The heart of the organization is keeping folks housed and doing what we can to promote housing stability. Mm-hmm. And that goes from a policy level. We have a small policy team of one at this moment, to our foreclosure defense team, to our mortgage assistance team. And then we also have an eviction diversion team, which consists of case managers, of tenant advocates, and our eviction defense team, which is tenant legal services and is able to assist with legal assistance. I think CEDP is quite unique because we have our law firm and our program side of things.
Right.
And ethically, we do function very separate as entities, yet there's a lot of tag teaming, a lot of collaboration that happens. There's also confidentiality that we have to respect for our clients, especially the clients that the legal team is actively serving. But I appreciate the work of CEDP because although finding one housing solution is not possible for one organization, it's a collaborative, collective effort. But CEDP has done immense and incredible work to find creative solutions to keep folks housed. And I'm honored to work at this organization. I am a single human. My perspectives and opinions are not directly affiliated with CEDP, but as someone who's been employed there for the past year and couple months, I've become very grateful and learned so much.
Yeah, when I knew you were working there, it was such a good fit. It makes perfect sense. It's a wonderful organization that I've had the privilege of meeting a number of its staff from some of the CED law team and side of things, and been helped by the advocates myself as one person really needing some support. And so, really appreciate that overview. And I've been, like you said, it's been growing, and I've been so impressed with how it's growing. And on the flip side of that it's like, well, that means that people are really struggling and need a lot of help. So, again, speak as general or specific as you need with regard to the job itself. But what is that trajectory kind of look like? I guess the trending, even maybe not the best word, but in terms of this organization keeps growing. So it's adding an office in Colorado Springs. So that means there's people in need in Colorado Springs. So what can you share with people curious about what that part of things looks like right now?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. So Colorado Springs, from what I have seen, is there's so much need around affordability, around permanent supportive housing, around permanent affordable housing, and the city, or I would say many entities like to define affordability in a way that doesn't accurately capture
It's not reality.
the income of its residents. And so I've seen a lot of needs there. For CEDP's interaction, we work with a lot of folks who are facing eviction, and within our Fourth Judicial Court, Colorado Legal Services is able to support folks facing eviction and filing their answers. But there's a large gap around what is the eviction process, what are tenants' rights in that process, what is a due process that every tenant is
due process, key phrase in America right now.
Yeah, which should be respected, right?
Yeah, let's reiterate that. We have to repeat it
Has
over and
to be
over.
respected, needs to be respected. And What the relationship for Colorado Springs and landlords looks like, I think, is quite interesting. I'm not too literally or knowledgeable around Denver, but for Colorado Springs, a lot of what I've seen is some landlords taking advantage of tenants, not providing tenants due process, and just pressuring that, hey, you're going to be evicted. And a lot of folks, when you hear eviction, it's a trigger word. It's terrifying. Housing instability is at the forefront of your mind. Am I going to lose my housing?
It'll make you sick, physically sick.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So what supports are in place for this to, for folks to understand what the process is and to know their rights in that process?
Ding, ding. Here we are, kids. Again, when we're saying knowledge of the system and knowledge of the processes is going to, work in your favor, make it work in your favor.
Absolutely. And then we have warranty of habitability issues. We have more legal issues. And Colorado Legal Service, from what I know, they are one of the only orgs that can provide some of that free legal assistance or, free legal assistance. And they have very strict eligibility requirements because they are federally funded. So that leaves a huge gap for some of our neighbors and community members. And I think where CEDP has been able to step up, or in this way CED law has been able to step up, is providing those services to folks who won't otherwise qualify for Colorado legal services. So where are the gaps in resources, and how are we working together to fill them and collaborate on ensuring folks aren't falling through the cracks? Because I do see a lot of that happening, and resources send you in a circle, and it's hard to know what's going to happen, when it's going to happen, how it's going to happen, if you're on the right list with the right person at the right time. So those are some of the patterns of what I've seen here in Colorado Springs.
Thank you so much. Really insightful. And again, contextually, like how we met as being people in the nonprofit advocacy side of things and painfully seeing over and over where the gaps are. So that's why it's such an honor to have you representing the org as well as being my friend on the show, because I just have a ton of respect for what has been achieved in just 5 years, really. And so kudos there. And so, of course, there's a number of programs that the organization is managing, but are there any right now that, since hopefully we have some listening ears on the show, you would want to highlight, just because sure, there's program deadlines or the funding is winding down or things like that, especially because in my case, that program that provided assistance, that was like COVID-based funding. I was really grateful I was eligible because COVID impacted just about everybody, so you can make the case, thankfully. But what does that look like right now? What should people know about if you need help, check if you're eligible?
Yeah. Excellent question. And when it comes to the mortgage assistance program, I'm not as well versed in that program. I do know it is a federally funded program, and I do know that we're expected to review a certain amount of applications per week. As far as the timeline for how long those funds will be available, I don't have concrete dates. I would say if you are eligible, and you could check it out at the CEDP website. But if you are eligible, I would encourage you to just check it out. You could call the Care Center, which is our call center, and they are pretty well versed on all of our programs, eligibility criteria, and how to access those programs. When it comes to other funding that could be trickling down or winding down, to the best of my knowledge, all of our programs as of right now are continuing. And any funding cuts that may be happening, our leadership is working very diligently to ensure that we don't have to rely on those funds moving forward. And I believe we are at that point. That conversation was held with leadership in March, I want to say.
Right.
So now in May, I have not heard anything else outside, and I have full trust in our leadership to ensure that our programs will remain running and accessible.
Well said, because I think a lot of organizations, whether you're nonprofit or, different types of industry, because we're in such a, again, chaotic time, uh, have been working to kind of prepare for the continued pivots that will need to happen. And in our case, if you're in the nonprofit sector, I think everyone is checking in with one another and being like, how is it going? Like, how are your programs? How are your people?
Yeah.
Because this time is just really rocking us. But that, I think, is one of the things we have in common. And I don't want to put words in your mouth there, but having a heart for advocacy and a heart for community, I think you work to just honor the balance that is, you know what, I'd rather be here than not, because we are clearly helping people. At the same time, these don't always feel like they are long enough term solutions because of the ultimate economic inequity that we're experiencing at a crisis level. And I think we've commiserated over this like dynamic. But are there, I guess I'd love for you to share what your thoughts, feelings are on that, because the point that I eventually am making now is that, there is something really deeply meaningful and priceless from the work that you can do in service of the community and some, like, just the people you meet and their humanity, their dignity. Like, it's about that too. And so, feel free to let people know, I think, through your work, some of what your thoughts are there.
Yeah. It's a line, or it's on my mind continuously. I want to say it's a line I teeter on as far as celebrating the small wins, the interactions that I get to have with community members, the cases where we are able to support and assist. Those are all wins in my brain. And it can coexist with this larger understanding that as far as sustainability, we need to push harder for social change. There's a bigger calling at play, and with rental assistance, with mortgage assistance, we're using the resources that we currently have to work within this large gap, this large systemic gap. And we're seeing the gap get bigger and bigger, and more folks hurting.
And it's not fair. Sorry, friend.
It's not. No, you're okay. It's hard. It's hard work. It's emotionally heavy. And then to sit with the larger objective, how do we push for social change? Because this is not sustainable.
And I appreciate, it's something I think that we would always do well to name or acknowledge, is that, like, they're gonna those things are gonna have to coexist for, like, our own mental well-being. Because we've got to take the wins where they are. Like, I remember visiting your office, and the person who came in after me, when you first were introducing yourself, giving them kind of the overview, I think they said something to the effect of, like, I'm just so glad someone responded. Like, someone's listening to me, someone's talking to me. And when you put that in the context of the emergency of, like, losing your housing and how deep that can cut for, again, just someone's humanity, their dignity. And it's already hard enough to reach out and ask for help. And then to feel like you keep getting sent in circles, right? It can really snowball. And I know we've seen that, but at the same time, anytime you can make someone or help someone feel seen and heard, like, that's a damn good thing, And so thank you for putting that, I think, very authentically. And for those who maybe haven't done this work, I think you're adding a layer of understanding for them, because, like, again, we're just human beings, and One of my lines is like, it's a marathon, not a sprint.
Yes.
And it's something, I shared on the last show. I am a county commissioner candidate running in 2026.
Whoop, whoop.
Thank you so much. And that has been like one of the fiercest battles yet, I would say, like internally. Because when you think of systems, like it can get challenging to look at yourself as the individual and be like, what am I even doing here? Like, but again, that's where remind yourself that we are a collective too, and we're stronger together. And there's something we love to talk about on this show is like the healing that you can find in community, and like how that's a medicine in itself. And so all those things are true at once, giving plenty of complex beauty to the world in itself.
Absolutely. And I know we've had conversations around our own healing journey and what it means in our roles as humans. And it's not just our professional roles, but our personal lives, our personal relationships, our professional relationships, and how our healing journey shows up in our ways to be our authentic selves and sit with others, just sit with them. So I appreciate that perspective from you as well.
I love it. I thank you. And yeah, this is how our conversations go. There's no shallow stuff here, people. It gets really deep. Don't be afraid.
My favorite was our conversation at Panda Express, where we sat there for a couple of hours, and I just learned so much because, again, like being in like this professional role, it came from a place of like, I want to help people, which is a very innocent place. It's how many people start
Your
off.
inner child, wants to be a helper. A lot of us. I'm a helper.
Yeah. And then how that's transformed to like what working at a nonprofit means, what being a part of these larger systems means. And it all goes back to our own healing journey and our ability to be our authentic selves and show up for ourselves in the same ways that we're able to show up for others.
Beautifully said. Yes. And so if you're taking anything away from that, like authenticity and being open are some key things that, we can all continue to grow in. I think that's a lifelong journey because it's probably pretty good for you. Yeah. Be yourself because you're awesome. So we've definitely touched on it, but this show, right, it's called Justice with Jax, and justice looks like many different things. And so can you dive in a little bit deeper, especially, I think, working where you do, housing justice in your own words, incorporate what the meaning is right in your daily work, but you're also a young Latina in El Paso County trying to make a living, and people under 40, I think especially, like that's one of many things I have on my agenda to talk about as a candidate, right, is that people under 40 we're obviously not represented in at various levels of our government. And like we have the most to lose, some of the people with the most to lose. And so would love to hear from you both, yes, professionally, personally, housing justice, what that has looked like from the different intersectionalities of who you are.
Oh, incredible question. So I would say I'm learning consistently and constantly learning new things and new ways to envision justice and pursue justice. Recently, I have been able to join in on the pro-housing partnership tenant union initiatives. And through that, I've been challenging my own thoughts that have existed around how I see justice, how I envision justice, to think bigger. And I think a lot of times my vision of justice gets lost in, I just got to get this work done. I got to just get through today, answer these emails, and I lose sight of what I'm truly fighting for and pushing for. And recently in one of those tenant union meetings, we discussed what it would look like to live in a utopian,
Dream big, baby.
Society.
Magic wand, whatever you have to tell yourself, but let's imagine it, right?
Yeah, and I'd never let my brain even imagine that. I was hearing everyone else talk about landlords don't exist in this world. In this world, these things don't exist. And in my brain, I'm like, these are avenues that I'm consistently thinking within every day to now take a step back and no, let's re-envision justice. Let's re-envision a world. Previously, I thought, no evictions for non-payment of rent, more tenant rights, more protection, housing stability. Every person deserves housing. Just because someone loses their job, can't pay their rent, they shouldn't be evicted and then have an eviction on their public record that impacts them moving forward. So my thoughts were specifically of justice were specifically within this very confined box of my work within the past few years. And I think as a human, I've really been challenging myself to think bigger about justice, about freedom, about what I want as a human, what I want for other humans. And so, needless to say, housing justice. Whew.
I know, it's like a big, lofty concept. And so, want to disclaim that I don't think that was a softball. But I ask because I feel like you have a really cool perspective, like the two pieces that I named where you're a young person here along the Front Range in what I think you could probably tell everyone listening, our political beliefs, there's alignment. And so being in El Paso County, that type of social environment where something like, and I'd love to hear if you have any thoughts on this, but something like, everybody, there are some jurisdictions, some counties where they have actually worked to do things like raise the minimum wage or even talking about, I think, caps on rent, just blowing people's minds with that kind of thinking, you know. And in El Paso County, I'm proud to be the people who are talking like that. And I think there's more and more of us. And, with this political climate, obviously it's challenging because there's this strategy, I think, of just total red herring, distractions from actually really substantive conversations like this about policy. But it's something that everybody wants because everybody's hurting from the housing crisis. And so yeah, if you have any more to add kind of with regard to that angle of the conversation, but love that you brought up pro-housing partnership as a board member here. Really enjoying supporting the organization and hoping to have Will, who is one of our new organizers, right? And doing that tenants work as well as Max. It is an incredible thing to see a place like quote unquote Colorado Springs, right? Organizing. That's the idea. And honestly, if you are heavy into the stereotype, which has some grain of truth about Colorado Springs being politically conservative, think about it in the way then that this is the perfect place where we are doing things like organizing and having these conversations to push back against what just is an absolute vacuum of substantive policymaking conversations to help the majority of people living here. Any other thoughts on some of those things that have come up, even in Colorado, I think we had some legislation come up, but it didn't go far, which was there's a specific part of Colorado law that doesn't allow, I think, rent caps, and you have to go jurisdiction by jurisdiction or something. Okay, so it seems like you know a little bit more than I do, at least.
I think my guess is as good as yours, but my understanding was similar to yours. For Colorado, there was the COFA, Colorado Homes for All, had worked to pass legislation around rent control being decided by local municipalities.
Right, and we didn't get there, unfortunately. But we started the conversation. And
we
that
did.
Means we have to keep the conversation going. Yeah.
And as you mentioned, I'm seeing a lot more momentum towards housing justice And I think a lot of people are just seeing more and more now the injustices.
Mm-hmm.
But to my understanding, that was the law that had, or the legislation that was introduced for a couple years in a row. And unfortunately, this year they weren't able to introduce it. In imagining a world where housing justice was possible, it would be, yes, with rent control. Or how about we remove capitalism from housing completely? How about giant corporations like Blackstone, like Greystar, like Atlas cannot continue to run the game for tenants, cannot continue to take advantage of the high demand for affordable rent, for places. How about it became so much more accessible for folks to purchase homes, and lenders and mortgages were accessible and the interest rates were a lot lower? What if we didn't use credit scores to define? Yes. What if we didn't put evictions on people's public records? What if evictions weren't like around? What if that wasn't possible? These are the things, when I think about housing justice, I want to continue to push myself to dream bigger and have conversations that are going to enlighten me to a world where all of this could be possible, and surround myself with community that is going to continue to push for this alongside me, together, unidos.
Perfecto. Thank you so much, friend. Just super well said. And I think, some emphasis on that is, and something we brought up on the show is that, what, affecting positive change takes time, dedication, energy. And so it's really good news that there are more people joining in on this conversation. And so I think just reiterating, like, it's going to take pretty much all of us. And I love, like, all the what ifs you named. I think maybe I'm biased here, but it just seems like there's certainly a way of thinking that people just demonize the act of asking a question. Like, how dare you question that capitalism isn't awesome for everybody? Because we know it's not. And because we live that every day. Thanks. So I think in El Paso County, that's somewhere where we can grow as well. Is like, it is okay to ask the what ifs and have these challenging conversations. And I know that, well, this is, and I don't want to speak for you, but I think an area of alignment for us where we've connected to is just being proud of like our heritage as Latinas and talking about what that means to us. And, so we also live in a community where we just saw the federal authorities, DHS, ICE, right, multiple agencies committing a raid in my neck of the woods over on the southeast side of town, south side. And, if you have any thoughts there, I think that's, very relevant to talk about when we're just talking about the context that we live in as Latinas here in El Paso County and people trying to do advocacy, social justice work. That was something recently that it was so sad, sad. And the way that our sheriff talked about it, the way that the mayor talked about it. One, the reason why I'm thinking about the sheriff is because to me, he's that primary example of like, how dare you ask any questions? No one was villainizing anyone by asking questions. We just want accountability, which I would argue we've had problems with the law enforcement here in this city, this county. And so that's one. And I was really ashamed that our mayor, who is an immigrant, was saying he welcomed more raids on our city. And for a mayor who, as I recall, has said, this is a welcoming community, or, I think the city had initiative of like doing these like block parties by neighborhood because community for connecting, for mental health and all this stuff. And I'm like, you know what, man, that just feels like a bit of hypocrisy, because I guess certain neighborhoods can do like that and be out in the open, but in other spaces with people who have done nothing more than what is akin to like a traffic violation by being here without documents in the country, you're going to criminalize them to the extent that you're welcoming more raids in our town, which is really fucking scary for everybody. Like, how dare you, man? And so I would be very grateful to hear your, what I know are heartfelt and thoughtful take on some of the shit that's been happening in this town.
Adios. The mayor's response, and even the sheriff included, communicates to us that, I mean, the quote from Animal Farm, all animals are created equal, but some are more equal than others. That close the door behind me mentality, that separation that we aren't all humans. And their actions very clear, their response to this event and their actions very clearly communicate that. And that is disheartening.
True.
That folks in leadership in these positions can look at my community, our community, our neighbors, and dehumanize at such a way to say, no, raids are welcomed, because not in my neighborhood.
Not in mine. Absolutely not, Mr. Mayor. No raids welcome here.
For him to be in that position and state that.
And, you know, with his immigrant status, right, which, man, that's a whole other conversation, but I know it because I've seen it in the Latino community, where there are people who, you know, went through the process to get their visa, etc., become naturalized or a citizen, and there's, you know, a chip on their shoulder about like, well, I did it the right way, so screw everybody else. That is just such a uninformed mentality. It's really just not acknowledging the reality of our immigration system and what it is to be here without documentation in reality, because it's, you know, an administrative law of the U.S. government. And so, no, you could say it's not very functional, and we know that, and why that's such a problem, and has been for really generations now for our community and families with mixed status. And so thank you for taking a beat with me to talk about that, because honestly, if we had hung out before this, you and I would have been talking about that. It just happens to be on the podcast this time.
And it happens to be such a recent event, but per the mayor's words, this is welcome to continue to happen, and
Horrifying.
Absolutely not in my neighborhood. And so these conversations with my friends, with colleagues, with people who I trust and are part of my community, I want to continue having these conversations, and also make myself open to having these conversations, even with people with different political views, as difficult as that might be. It's essential to continue to ask those questions, and
it's what I'm signed up for. Yeah, you and me both. And thank you, because that's something I wanted to really name as well, as like, it is really important to call bullshit on that bullshit. And it's going to be, it's on this show, on the record. And, you know, we want more voices to say, no, Mayor Yummy, it is not welcome. Raids by ICE and DHS are not welcome in Colorado Springs.
Not at all.
And so there are many of us who would echo that sentiment. And I think that, thank you for letting me go on the track about kind of what our county, like, social culture is here. And do you think there's one thing that we always include on this show too, which is very important, because we know we talk about like some pretty consequential things, like heavy things, trying to reach balance in all things. What would you say is good in your life, whether that's work or anything else that's been coming up for you?
I love the highlight of the good, the practicing of things that we are grateful for.
Yes.
I would like to say very quickly before we shift gears that the DHS, ICE utilized the DEA to make this possible. And it was in a lot of ways, a smoke over the fact that this was an ICE raid.
Yes.
Because of
Thank
how
you for
folks
naming
have
that.
become aware of their rights. And it's not yet concluded what type of warrant they used
Interesting. Yeah.
to commit this. But the DEA, by saying it's drug associated, affiliated, that these people that the unfortunate folks who were detained because of this.
I was like, is this a quinceañera? When I was looking at some of the images that came out. Yeah.
Yeah. What they were saying, it was the public narrative that the sheriff that the
You
city
mean
is
cops
giving.
lie?
Oh
Boy. We can't talk about that on this show.
Boy.
So what we're talking about, sorry to interrupt my friend, but the narrative, police have different narratives than what the actual people that they are criminalizing are living. And that's like the heart of what part of my case. And that is so well said, my friend, because these multi-agency efforts, right, in my case, to retaliate against us, right, they use the FBI Joint Terrorism Task Force. And because we're leftists who do community bike raids and like food pantries and stuff, we're domestic terrorists is the accusation, right? And so just like you're naming here, this drug enforcement agency was really used as a screener, an excuse to commit an immigration raid. And let's put an emphasis on what you said too, is that as much as I hesitate, there's not a good way to put it, but at least what we may be noticing here is that people are learning their rights. And that's a damn good thing.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. And absolutely, these our agencies, DEA,
all the alphabet
FBI,
boys, right? That's the other podcast that thanks, shout out Trevor Aronson, brought the story of our case to light. Yeah, it's a persistent issue, right, with federal agencies and how they interact with local PDs and the sheriffs, county, etc. And, you know, in this case, especially because there's an administration that enables them to do it, they used this multi-agency effort to really, for all intents and purposes, conduct an immigration raid. And another excuse that they use, and I think this applies to our case, was like national security and terrorism, right?
Yeah.
And they use those keywords to just get carte blanche on violating people's dignity. I will say that. And in my case, violating their constitutional rights. And you know, friend, what is really striking about that raid to me as well, which I guess remains to be seen. Hopefully there'll be some like good journalism that comes out about it. But to me, typically, these agencies, which I believe the sheriff did, or was it DHS, they gave like a shout out to the administration, right, the president, and it was just really distasteful. But it was basically them saying like, yeah, we're doing this because of who the president is, basically, right? Super disturbing. I am interested to see. I feel like because they have this boldness to them, they've been really using the media to pump out all the stats they can, like in their stats, so to speak, in their favor. So I'm kind of surprised we haven't seen a talking point from them saying we arrested X amount of people that were in the country illegally and they have been charged with XYZ, something like that, you know? I think I venture to guess, and I would love anyone, please provide more information that can be verified, but I would venture to guess because they can't claim that. Because through all that law enforcement action, they didn't get that many charges out of it. They weren't busting all that crime as they claim that they were. And that's what happened in our case too. 6 people arrested, hardly any, I don't think any of us convicted, went through the system, you know, pleas, blah, blah, blah. Charges bumped down or dismissed for some of us. So it's that really fucked up dynamic where the entities that be can use their power, just an accusation, just that moment of the raid, fuck up your life. And then on the back end, are they going to be held accountable for it? Mm-hmm. And so I'm holding on to that. I'm going to drag my ass up to Denver for all of you listening to this on Tuesday and sit in the U.S. District Court to be there physically and bring that energy of accountability to Armendariz versus City of Colorado Springs. Gonna glow.
Yes, my heart is with you, my friend.
I appreciate that. I appreciate that. And again, thank you for naming that important finer point. And in effort to provide some balance to what we discuss, because on this show, I think it's come up a few times now where like the good and bad coexist, like yin and yang. The many wonderful examples of what the duality of life is, or the layers of gray that life can be, because maybe it's not always black and white. But with that said, so I know there's light in your life.
Yes.
And we'd love to hear a little bit about it.
Yeah, I want to take it back to the basic things that make me happy to be human. Last night I was practicing in my gratitude journal of the things that I was grateful for, and being a Latina, being
daily, bruh.
Yeah,
absolutely.
There's the self-doubt that's existed in my brain, and it's been a part of my relationship with myself that I'm now working on acknowledging and dismissing. It's been a continuous journey. So the good things in my life, the light in my life has come from those moments where I'm able to love and accept myself as my whole self and stop myself in the tracks when I'm going towards thoughts around self-doubt and practice knowing who I am, why I am. And that has been the biggest form of light in my life. And along with that, community. I mean,
definitely.
When I'm in a room of people and I can just feel
it. Yeah.
All of our hearts beating in sync as we are discussing and envisioning a future where justice is possible. Those have been the things that have brought me a lot of light lately. And then always my walks with flowers. I love going on a walk and then looking at flowers, taking pictures of them, and keep on going. It's those small things that have brought so much light and so much joy into my life. I mean, even my walking, my hiking, looking at birds as I'm hiking, those are all things that just make me feel so warm and so seen. And so true to myself, and I find a lot of peace in that. It brings a lot of light into my life.
Well said. Whoever is listening is going to get some warm and glow off of everything you just said. And I just bought like a Rocky Mountain pocket, like nature, like what was it? A guide for mammals, pocket guide. Because yes, like the medicine we find in nature, and you know, so wonderful living here in Colorado and the good things that we do have. And I would add, I enjoyed when we recently got to go kickboxing.
Yes.
That was awesome. You were so badass. I knew you would be.
A lot of fun.
Yeah. So we'll have to link up and get out there again soon.
Yes, agreed. I felt super empowered to be alongside you. And I had also never been so close to passing out.
It is high impact training, indeed.
It is.
I gotta punch those heavy bags. I gotta punch something.
They're incredible. It's incredible. It's such a release, an energy release that I didn't know I needed, and I do miss going to the classes. I'm gonna need to.
We gotta have you back. Yeah,
I've got to work on my work boundaries for sure.
Well, thank you for all the work that you have been putting in, and I think here, if there's anything else you want to add, like maybe the website one more time, if people want to check out your programs.
Yeah, you can reach our programs by going to cedproject.org.
Perfect. And remember, C does not stand for Colorado, like many of us think it does. I did that for a long time. So that is the Community Economic Defense Project. Thank you so much, my friend. And here's where we will close it out and remind people that episodes of Justice with Jax are recorded as a member of the Studio 809 podcast collective at the Nexus Community Co-working Space in downtown Colorado Springs. And so remember to ask yourself 2 questions. Who's telling your story? And how are you being the change you want to see in the world today? This is Justice with Jax, signing off.